Back in 2006, I worked at one of those big electronics stores with an IT service desk where people could bring in their broken devices. Our store was located in Columbus, Georgia, right across the bridge from Phoenix City, Alabama. This location detail matters because we got a really mixed customer base. Lots of awesome servicemen and women from nearby Fort Benning, but also some, let's just say, less progressive folks from across the state line. Now I should mention that I'm a 5'1" woman who back then weighed about 120 pounds, soaking wet, basically hobbit-sized. Despite my small stature, I was one of the lead technicians in our department. New hires came to me when they couldn't figure something out. Our team was incredible. My direct supervisor was amazing, and even the general manager of the store was great. We'd often grab drinks after work. It was honestly one of the best places I've ever worked, retail or otherwise. So this one day, I'm working the counter doing diagnostics and giving repair estimates when this customer walks in. Let's call him the Confederate. He was sporting a cut-off t-shirt, worn jeans, and a baseball cap with a Confederate flag that barely contained his mullet. I try never to judge people by appearance. I've had plenty of customers who dressed similarly but were absolute delights to work with. Still, I kept my guard up just in case. The Confederate marches up to the counter and practically slams his PC tower onto the desk. He gruffly told me that his computer was broken and needed fixing. I started to politely respond that I would take a look at it, but he cut me off before I could finish. He gave me a disgusted look and asked me to repeat myself. When I tried again to explain that I needed to examine his computer to diagnose the problem, he loudly refused with a hell no. That's when I realized exactly where this was heading. I explained to him that, unfortunately, I wouldn't be able to give him an estimate if he didn't allow me to diagnose his computer. That's when he made his position clear. He declared there was absolutely no way a woman could possibly know anything about computers, and he wouldn't let me touch his machine. He demanded to see a manager instead. Oh, this was going to be good. He probably wanted the general store manager, but I couldn't resist what was about to happen. I responded in my sweetest voice that I would get the manager for him right away. My direct supervisor, let's call him the boss, was in the back working on repairs when I walked in with the biggest grin on my face. I told him there was a customer up front asking for the manager. He looked confused since he was just our department supervisor, not the store manager. I quickly explained the situation, and his face split into the brightest smile. Now I should mention that the boss is a 6'3", 280-pound black man who looked like he could bench press a car. Despite his intimidating size, he was the gentlest, most lovable teddy bear who everyone adored. The moment the boss stepped out to the counter, the Confederate visibly tensed up. The boss greeted him politely and asked about the problem. The Confederate absolutely lost it. He started with a shocked refusal before launching into the most horrific, racist tirade I've ever witnessed. The slurs just kept coming as staff and other customers watched in shock. It was like a car crash, awful but impossible to look away from. Security had to come over to try to calm him down. Interestingly, our entire security team was also black, which only made the Confederate even more enraged. Eventually, the police had to be called because the Confederate was threatening me, calling me all sorts of names, and threatening the boss and security with violent slurs. The store's general manager came out of his office and immediately called the police. And whoever was dispatching that day deserves a medal, because they sent 2 black officers to the scene. The general manager and I were literally the only white people involved in this situation, besides the Confederate, and I watched with pure satisfaction as he was handcuffed and dragged away by the police, still foaming at the mouth and screaming. The Confederate never got his computer fixed, and I'm pretty sure he received a lifetime ban from our store. California was an amazing place to grow up, but living inland meant beach trips were a rare treat. Once or twice each summer, my mom would load us into our old station wagon, and my younger brother and I would excitedly count down the days until we could run barefoot on the sand. This one summer, I had just turned 8, and my little brother was about 6 or 7. We'd been saving up our allowance for weeks to buy new beach toys, bright plastic buckets and shovels in yellow and blue. The morning of our beach trip, we woke up before the sun, too excited to sleep. When we finally arrived at the beach, my brother and I raced down to the shoreline, leaving Mom to set up the umbrella and towels. We spent hours searching for the perfect spot to build our sandcastle. Not too dry, not too wet. We needed that perfect consistency where the sand would hold its shape. I shouted excitedly when we found our ideal location. The sand was just damp enough to pack well, and we immediately got to work. My brother was in charge of filling the buckets with sand while I carefully flipped them over to create towers. We dug a moat around the perimeter and decorated it with shells we'd collected. After nearly 2 hours of work, our masterpiece was complete. It had 4 tall towers, a drawbridge made from a piece of driftwood, and even little flags made from seaweed and sticks. My brother excitedly suggested we should get Mom to see our creation, jumping up and down with enthusiasm. But before we could call her over, this bigger kid, probably my age or a bit older, came running toward our castle. Without warning, he jumped right into the middle of it, laughing as one of the towers crumbled beneath his feet. My brother shouted at him to stop, but the kid ignored him. The kid mockingly insulted our castle while continuing to stomp around it. He called it stupid and dumb as he destroyed our hard work. He kept jumping and kicking, destroying everything we'd worked on for hours. I just sat there watching, knowing there was no point in fighting back against someone bigger than us. My little brother started crying beside me. After the kid had completely flattened our castle, he ran off laughing toward some other kids further down the beach. My brother sobbed, asking why the kid had done that. He cried about how hard we had worked on our castle. I put my arm around him and comforted him, saying we could build another one. My brother wiped his tears and worried that the bully would just come back and kick down any new castle we built. I looked around trying to figure out how to protect our next creation when I spotted it, a large flat rock sticking up through the sand. It was about a foot high and seemed embedded in the beach. I reassured my brother, telling him not to worry because I had an idea. I immediately went to work covering the rock with a layer of wet sand. My brother watched curiously at first, not quite understanding what I was doing, but soon he joined in, and we started rebuilding our castle around and over the hidden rock. We had barely gotten started when we saw the big kid marching back in our direction. My brother and I quickly moved away from our half-built castle. The kid spotted our new construction and grinned wickedly. Without hesitation, he ran full speed and launched himself into a dramatic spin kick, aimed right at the center of our castle. The sound that followed was unforgettable. A solid thud followed by a high-pitched scream. The kid collapsed instantly, grabbing his foot and rolling around in the sand. The kid screamed in pain, repeatedly yelling about his hurt foot as he writhed in the sand. He didn't say anything to us directly. He just dragged himself up and limped away crying, leaving a trail of uneven footprints in the sand. My brother looked at me with wide eyes, and we both tried not to laugh as we went back to repairing our castle. My brother whispered that the rock had been a good idea as he carefully rebuilt one of the towers. About 20 minutes later, I noticed a woman storming across the beach toward our mom. She was pulling the limping boy behind her. Even from a distance, I could tell she was angry by the way she was gesturing. The woman angrily accused us of deliberately hurting her son. She pointed at us while mentioning his possibly broken foot. She complained that we had buried a rock in the sand to trick him and called it dangerous. My mom asked what exactly had happened. My mom then asked if the woman had questioned why her son was kicking our sandcastle in the first place. The woman seemed taken aback by this question. My mom explained that we had been building sandcastles all morning. She told the woman that her son had completely destroyed our first castle, and when we built another one, he had tried to destroy that one too. She clarified that the rock was already there, and we had just built around it. The woman started to say something else, but my mom interrupted her. My mom suggested that perhaps the woman should teach her son not to destroy other children's things, and then he wouldn't hurt himself in the process. The woman yanked her son away and stormed off down the beach. My mom never mentioned the incident to us. She just came over, admired our castle, which we'd finished rebuilding, and asked if we wanted ice cream. As for my brother and me, we spent the rest of the day building the most elaborate sandcastle of our lives, completely undisturbed. I've never been the biggest kid in class. Far from it, actually. I was always one of the shorter ones, usually getting picked last for basketball and having to ask for help to reach the top shelf in the classroom. But my best friend, he was something else entirely. Even at 15, he was already 6 feet tall and built like a brick wall. While most of us were still trying to grow into our awkward teenage bodies, he looked like he could walk onto a rugby field and hold his own against the adults. But the thing about my friend is that he never used his size to intimidate others. Instead, he became a sort of unofficial protector for kids like me. Our school still used corporal punishment back then. The cane or switch was common for misbehavior. Most teachers followed the rules. Never hit above the shoulders, never hit too hard. Basic human decency, you'd think. That day started like any other. We were in Mr. Johnson's class. I won't use his real name, but everyone in town still knows exactly who I'm talking about all these years later. He was notorious for his short temper and heavy hand with a cane. I was having a rough week. My parents were going through a nasty divorce, and my grandmother had just been hospitalized. The school administration knew about my situation, but apparently nobody thought to inform Mr. Johnson. The class was chatty that day, with everyone talking in small groups while we were supposed to be working on an assignment. Mr. Johnson threatened the entire class, saying he would cane each and every one of us if we didn't quiet down immediately. Nobody took him seriously at first. He was always making threats. I leaned over to my friend, keeping my voice down. I quietly told my friend that I needed to step outside for some air because I couldn't focus that day. My friend reassured me that it was fine to go and that he would cover for me. I was just about to stand up when I felt an explosion of pain across the back of my neck. Mr. Johnson had struck me with the cane right where my neck meets my skull, a completely prohibited area. Everything went fuzzy and I slumped forward, dazed. What happened next is something I'll never forget. My friend, who was normally the calmest person I knew, moved with a speed and fury I'd never seen before. In one fluid motion, he was on his feet, towering over Mr. Johnson. He grabbed the teacher by his collar and dragged him into the corner of the room, pinning him against the wall by his neck. The corner happened to be right next to the classroom door. My friend angrily demanded to know what was wrong with Mr. Johnson, reminding him that he knew hitting students in that area was forbidden. The entire class went silent. Nobody had ever seen a student manhandle a teacher before. I was still seeing stars, but I managed to stumble to my feet and make my way toward them. Mr. Johnson desperately pleaded to be released, claiming that what my friend was doing constituted assault. I reached the door and looked at my friend. He looked very angry, but when he saw me, something in his expression changed. I told my friend to let the teacher go. My friend hesitated, then shrugged and released his grip on the teacher's collar. Mr. Johnson sagged with relief, thinking I was showing mercy, that I was going to walk out and leave him be. He was wrong. I grabbed the door and began slamming it against him. Not just once or twice, but repeatedly, with all the force my smaller frame could muster. The sound of the door hitting him echoed through the suddenly silent classroom. For about 30 seconds, all you could hear was the rhythmic thud of the door and Mr. Johnson's pained grunts. When I finally stopped, Mr. Johnson slid down the wall, barely conscious. My friend later told me you could see the dent from the teacher's head in that door until we graduated 2 years later. My friend suggested that we needed to get the nurse. I responded that he should go do that while I would explain what happened to the principal. We split up, my friend heading to the medical bay, while I walked straight to the principal's office. I explained everything, how Mr. Johnson had hit me in a forbidden area, how my friend had initially restrained him, and yes, how I had retaliated with the door. The principal listened carefully, called in other teachers to verify Mr. Johnson's history of excessive punishment, and checked the medical report about where I'd been struck. The outcome? I was given the rest of the week off to recover and deal with my family situation. My friend wasn't punished at all for grabbing the teacher, and Mr. Johnson was immediately struck off the National Teaching Register and forbidden from ever teaching again. We discovered that the other teachers couldn't stand Mr. Johnson either. Rather than being outraged at what we'd done, they thought it was hilarious that he'd been taken down by a couple of 15-year-olds. For years afterward, whenever a teacher left the school suddenly, everyone, even other teachers, would say they fully Johnsoned it. I never considered myself a confrontational person. Actually, I pride myself on being pretty easygoing, someone who can get along with almost anyone in the workplace. That changed about 10 years ago when I had a run-in with someone I'll just call the project manager. When I joined the company, I was excited about the opportunity. The role seemed perfect for my skill set, and I was eager to prove myself. The company was well established, with a mix of long-term employees and newer hires like me. Most people were welcoming, except for one. The project manager had been with the company for nearly 15 years. While her official title was project manager, she was really more of an office administrator. Various internal projects would get assigned to her, things to help improve office operations, but nothing business critical. She seemed territorial about these responsibilities, even though they weren't prestigious. About 6 months after I started, something unusual happened. One of these internal projects was deemed important enough to attract executive attention. Instead of letting the project manager continue handling it, management reassigned it to me. I wasn't trying to step on anyone's toes, I was just doing what was asked of me. But from day one, it was clear the project manager wasn't happy about this change. I asked her if we could review the current status of the project and what had been done so far. She dismissed me, claiming she was extremely busy and that I should email her my questions instead. I did email her, but her responses were always vague or delayed. When I'd follow up in person, she'd claim she never received my emails or that I wasn't being specific enough. Every request for information turned into an ordeal. When I asked for vendor contact information, she refused, claiming the information was confidential and that she needed management approval before sharing, even though we both reported to the same manager who had already approved the transition. This pattern continued for weeks. The stonewalling meant the project fell behind schedule. Soon, executives were asking questions about the delays. During one tense meeting, I finally spoke up about struggling to get necessary information from the previous project lead, which had caused some of the delays. The project manager immediately changed her attitude, putting on a sickeningly sweet voice as she claimed she'd been bending over backwards to help me. She insisted she'd answered every question and shared all relevant files, but the problem was that I didn't understand the project's complexity. She emphasized that she'd been managing it for years and that it takes time to learn all the nuances. The executive seemed unsure who to believe, but I kept pushing forward. I started documenting every interaction, saving emails, and finding workarounds to get the information I needed. Just as I was making progress, the company announced a round of layoffs. The project manager was one of those affected. Despite my frustrations with her, I didn't feel good about anyone losing their job. Due to her long tenure, she received a generous 3-month severance package with extended benefits. The company had an unusual policy of cutting monthly severance checks instead of paying out all at once, but there were conditions. She had to sign a non-disclosure agreement, a non-disparagement agreement, and confirm she had handed over all company materials and files. After she left, I went to the shared network drive to locate some important project files I still needed. To my shock, the folders were completely empty. Everything was gone. The project manager had deleted all the files before leaving. This was before cloud storage solutions were common. Everything was stored on shared network drives, which didn't have robust recovery options. Getting backups wasn't going to be simple. Then I remembered something. The project manager used her work email for everything personal, including her LinkedIn account. I also knew that emails of departed employees were forwarded to their department heads for a few months after they left. I sent her a LinkedIn message pretending to be friendly. I expressed that I'd heard about her departure and hoped she could use the time to take that vacation she always talked about. I mentioned I'd noticed the missing project files and asked if she had backups to share. Her response was immediate and hostile. She told me not to pretend to be nice and accused me of possibly helping to get her fired. She boasted that she had deleted everything and told me in no uncertain terms to deal with it myself. That email was forwarded to Human Resources, who immediately recognized she had admitted in writing to deliberately deleting company files, a clear violation of her severance agreement. All her remaining severance payments were stopped immediately. I eventually found older backups of most files and completed the project successfully.